What if I'm not going to be okay? That is the fear beneath every anxious thought, every worst case scenario, every spiral that starts at 3 a.m. and doesn't stop until morning. You know that feeling? The world is spinning around you and you are on a ride you hate and you cannot get off. Your chest is tight, your mind is 3 steps ahead of the present moment, already in the worst version of what hasn't happened yet. That is anxiety. Not just a feeling, not just nerves. It is the fear of not being okay, dressed up as every worst case scenario your mind can paint. And for a lot of us, we have been living inside that fear for so long, we don't even recognize it as fear anymore. It just feels like life. I know that place. There was a time I never thought I would be free of it. This episode is for the version of you that feels the same way, because there is a way out, and it doesn't require you to fight your anxiety. It requires you to understand it. I grew up in an environment where I had to be 10 steps ahead just to feel safe. Always looking around the corner, always scanning for what was coming next. That was my childhood. And when you live like that as a child, when your nervous system is in constant motion just to survive, you don't have the luxury of understanding what you're feeling. You just get through. And getting through for me meant living inside my own head. I also learned to never step out of line, to be small, to be good, to not cause ripples. Because safety meant being invisible enough that nothing bad would come. Maybe you learned the same thing in your own environment, in your own way. That was how we managed worlds that felt too unpredictable to trust. I didn't know at the time that what I was experiencing was anxiety. I just knew something always felt wrong, and I didn't know how to make it stop. It wasn't until my early 20s that I had my first full panic attack. And I want to tell you what that felt like, because if you have ever been there, you know exactly what I mean. Everything went blurry. I felt like a zombie, moving through my own life. There was a metallic taste in my mouth that wouldn't go away. And underneath all of it, imagine the worst fear you can possibly imagine. That is what it felt like was occurring in real time. And I couldn't snap out of it. The first one lasted a week. And in that week, I did something that made complete sense to my nervous system and no sense at all to my healing. I reached out to my father, the person I feared most, looking for comfort, looking for a father figure, and the only one I had. I also went back to everything I had been raised in. I was raised in a system that felt like a prison. I had left that world behind. But during that week, in the middle of that fear, I went back. I started wearing only skirts again and conforming. I made a promise to God. I bargained my way back into the cage. And here's what I understand now that I didn't understand then. I never felt safe growing up. I always felt scared. And it was all I knew. And so when the fear peaked, my mind didn't send me towards safety. It sent me back to familiarity, back to my father, who had never been safety beyond basic needs, back to the rules, which were never about protection, back to the programming that said, turn to God, turn to your father, shrink back into what you know, or you will not be okay. And I went back to mine, not because he had ever shown me he knew best, but because my mind had been programmed to believe he did. That is what anxiety does. It doesn't reach for what is true. It reaches for what it knows. And what it knows is the past. And what I remember from that conversation, when I reached out in my most broken moment, was one thing he said. The greatest battle ever fought is in the mind. Something in me went still when I heard it. And to this day, I hold it as the one piece of advice he ever gave me that held value because it wasn't seated with his need to control and manipulate me, and because something inside of me recognized it as truth. The innate wisdom we so often dismiss by giving our power to others. And that is another thing that breeds anxiety. When we give someone else authority over our truth. When we look outward for someone to tell us what is right for us, we begin perceiving ourselves as powerless. And a person who believes they are powerless has every reason to be afraid. I teach my own children this. Yes, come to me for guidance. Come to me for wisdom and perspective. That is my job as a parent. But in the end, the wisdom that will guide your life already lives inside of you. Trust it. And after that first panic attack, they kept coming. I started to notice a pattern. The panic attacks didn't arrive randomly. They arrived with drama, with money worries, with the moments in life where the ground felt less stable beneath me. And that's when I began to understand something. Anxiety isn't chaos. It's predictable. It finds the places where you feel most unsafe and it moves in. Because here's what I came to understand. A panic attack is not something separate from anxiety. It is anxiety at its most extreme, just turned up all the way. Over the next decade, I would struggle with anxiety and panic attacks repeatedly. I was medicated for them. And every time I tried to come off the medication, 3 days in, the withdrawal would start. And I would go back because the anxiety was still there. The medicine was just a Band-Aid over a wound that had never been looked at directly. Here is what anxiety actually is. It is not your present moment. It is your past projected into a future that hasn't happened yet. This is how the mind has learned to live in the 3D reality. It is ingrained in us so deep from such a young age that we do not even recognize it as a program. It just feels like who we are. At some point in your life, maybe early, maybe later, something happened that taught your nervous system that the world was not safe, that you were not okay. And your mind took that lesson and built a program around it. A program designed to protect you by staying one step ahead of danger. And here's what the program does. It skips over what is stable and true right now and sprints directly to the worst version of what hasn't happened yet. It bypasses the present moment entirely because the present moment feels too still. And a nervous system that grew up in chaos doesn't trust quiet. It mistakes stillness for something about to go wrong. So it creates the threat itself in your mind, in your body, in the story it tells you at 3 a.m. about everything that could fall apart. That is anxiety, not a prediction, not the truth. An old program running in a present moment it was never designed for. So why does anxiety feel so physical? Why the tight chest, the racing heart, the shallow breathing, the feeling that your legs won't move? Because your body does not know the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. Your mind tells a story, and your body believes every single word of it. You know those dreams where something is chasing you, and no matter how hard you try, your legs won't move. That is your nervous system in freeze. And anxiety works the same way. The threat isn't real, but your body has already responded as if it is. Your nervous system has two settings, on and off. The on switch, fight, flight, or freeze, gets activated the moment your mind perceives danger, real danger, or imagined danger. It cannot tell the difference. So when your mind sprints to that doom-filled future, the one that hasn't happened yet, your body goes with it. It floods with stress hormones. Your heart rate climbs. Your breathing shallows. Your muscles brace, all preparing you to survive something that exists only in your mind. That is why you cannot simply think your way out of anxiety, because by the time you're in it, your body is already in it too. And the body needs a different kind of language to come back to safety. So now you understand what anxiety is, and you understand why it lives in your body. But here's the piece that keeps most people stuck even after they understand all of that. Fear is familiar, and the nervous system will always choose familiar over unknown. Even when familiar is painful, even when familiar is the very thing keeping you small. We have been conditioned into fear from childhood, from environment, from survival. And without awareness, we keep choosing it because it is the only language our nervous system has ever known. And here's what makes it even more complicated. Anxiety gives the illusion of control. If I worry about everything that could go wrong, maybe I can stay one step ahead of it. Maybe I can protect myself. But that is not protection. That is the mind keeping you a prisoner in a future that doesn't exist yet. And here is what I want you to understand. You are not a sacrificial lamb to life. You are not here to suffer. You are here to move through the ebb and flow of it, to rise and to rest and to trust. Suffering is not life happening to you. Suffering is the mind dictating life to you. And the moment you recognize that is the moment you can begin to choose differently. And I want to say something before we move into the practice. I believe in some form humans will always have low-level anxiety from time to time. It is part of being alive. But there is a difference between anxiety that visits and anxiety that runs your life. And what closes that gap more than any technique, more than any medication, is going back and doing the healing work, the inner child work, the retraining, building inner authority, self-trust, and trust in life itself. That is the medicine that does a real healing. And the side effects are ones you embrace with gratitude. I want to leave you with something you can return to every time anxiety shows up. And I want you to understand something before we begin. The mind in anxiety is on repeat. It loops, it spirals, it replays the same fears over and over again. So you don't fight the repetition. You meet it with your own. You out-repeat the fear with truth. Here is how. Interrupt it. The moment you feel anxiety rising, the tight chest, the edge, the spiral beginning, you stop and you ask yourself one question. Is this real right now? Not is this possible? Not could this happen? Is this actually happening right now? And then what evidence do I have that this won't be okay? In reality, have I not always figured it out? Why am I allowing the past to write the story of my future? Let the mind answer and watch how quickly the story falls apart when you demand evidence. Get it out of your body. Write it down. All of it. Every fear, every worry, every worst case scenario the mind is spinning. Get it out of your body and onto the page. Because fear lives in the dark. And the moment you shine a light on it, the moment you see it written in front of you, it begins to lose its power. You can look at it clearly. You can debunk it. You can see it for what it actually is, a story, not the truth. And for the third step, I want to invite you deeper. Because understanding anxiety is one thing. Retraining the nervous system is another. I created a guided audio called When Anxiety Shows Up and a workbook that walks alongside it. Together, they give you something to reach for every single time anxiety arrives. The link is below. I want to offer you the soul musing for reflection. The power of our minds can support us just as easily as it can keep us bound to untruths and beliefs we have adopted over time. When we realize we can change our thought patterns, we regain choice. Unlearning these patterns requires a daily commitment to the self through repetition, awareness, and a willingness to strip away conditioning. We begin to release what no longer serves us and step into a more empowered way of living. And I want to leave you with these questions for reflection. Where is anxiety controlling your life right now? And what are the specific triggers that send you back into the old programming? When anxiety arrives, where do you reach? And is what you're reaching for actually safety, or just familiarity masking as safety? What is one belief about yourself or your life that anxiety has convinced you is true, that you have never stopped to demand evidence for? If you are in it right now, in the fear, in the spiral, in the ride you cannot get off, I want you to hear this. The anxiety is not telling you the truth. The fear is real, but the threat is not. Through my journey of anxiety, I have learned that my place of power is questioning the reality of the fear. We do not have to live this way. Because I truly believe that when we begin healing ourselves, we create more compassion, more understanding, and ultimately a better world for everyone. With much love, I'll see you in the next one, dear soul.